This breaking news that President Trump announces that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem is being replaced by Senator Markwayne Mullin effective March 31st. So this coming down just moments ago as we continue to follow this breaking news. And what we're doing is we do want to share just a little bit more while we're waiting to be joined by Ryan Schmelz, my colleague at LiveNOW from Fox. I wanted to share this live look with you because coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we are expecting to hear from Representative Jeffries and possibly other Democratic lawmakers, and it will be interesting to see if they react to this breaking news that President Trump has now fired DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. So we were just hearing moments ago from Republican lawmakers prior to this breaking news. They did not allude to this, but we are going to continue to follow this. My producer is telling me something. Let's just mute my audio so I can hear what they have to say. All right, so we're going to continue to follow this breaking news story. And for that, I did want to bring in my colleague, Ryan Schmelz, who has been covering all angles of Capitol Hill. So I'm just going to pull up his shot right here as you bear with me. This is live right here on LiveNOW from Fox as we continue to follow this. So I'm just going to put up the social media post from President Trump as we're working to get him routed in. But for now, take a look at this. This is President Trump's lengthy social media post naming the new DHS secretary. So I did want to give you the opportunity to read this post from President Trump as he announced that he has fired DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and is now replacing her by Senator Markwayne Mullin. I wanted to bring in my colleague, Ryan Schmelz, who continues to cover all of these angles. And Ryan, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier this morning. There were rumblings on Capitol Hill that this might happen. We were hearing from Secretary Noem for the past 2 days on Capitol Hill as she was being grilled by lawmakers. And as you noted, some of even the Republican lawmakers were holding her feet to the fire. Share with me, you know, the very latest on this news as it has just been made official, President Trump firing DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
Well, right. You go back to the Alex Preddy situation and how the situation in Minnesota had unfolded. There were rumblings that there was frustration within the White House when it comes to DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, including some members, maybe not the biggest Trump loyalist out there, those who've been critical of the president on the Republican side, who had called on him to fire Kristi Noem or ask her to resign. Now, that quieted down a little bit. Obviously, there was a number of things in the news, such as the Iran situation, that kind of took over. But then this week, when Secretary Noem appeared before a Judiciary Committee hearing on the Senate side, you saw Senator John Kennedy, somebody who is considered to be loyal to the president, really grill Secretary Noem on a number of things, including the amount of money that she was spending on an ad campaign for DHS, which was over $100 million, allegedly. So you started to hear this reporting, and then, of course, a report came out by Punchbowl today that President Trump had called senators about potentially replacing Secretary Noem, and that Markwayne Mullin, the senator from Oklahoma, was actually his favorite or a potential favorite for President Trump. When we started looking into this, we had eventually heard that these calls about Secretary Noem had extended on to House members as well. So President Trump had certainly been, making the rounds on Capitol Hill, making phone calls about Secretary Noem's future. And it seemed like the rumblings were just getting louder and louder throughout the day. And this all happened relatively quick. This news came out earlier today. There were a lot of questions that were going around. But ultimately, sitting here right now, Secretary Noem is going to be out on March 31st. And the expectation is Markwayne Mullin is going to replace her.
And I did want to share with our viewers once again, Ryan, the social media post that President Trump posted just moments ago. And I wanted to get your take on all of this. You know, I'm just going to read just a few snippets for our viewers. But he starts with saying, "I am pleased to announce that the highly respected United States Senator from the great state of Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin, will become the United States Secretary of Homeland Security effective March 31st. The current Secretary, Kristi Noem, who has served us well and has had numerous and spectacular results, especially on the border, will be moving to the Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas, our new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere we are announcing on Saturday. I thank Kristi for her service at Homeland." You know, Ryan, as you're taking a look at this social media post, in terms of the wording, in terms of the phrasing, the information that President Trump shares with this, he then goes on to tout Senator Mullin's lengthy resume, you know, but from this, is there anything that you can glean from President Trump's remarks? He's certainly not shy about making his position known.
It's a very complimentary post about Secretary Noem. It seems like there is a smooth transition process that's laid out here where she's going to move to a different position at the end of the month. It's not an outright firing, but it is a replacing of the DHS secretary and a way for him to move off of her in a way that doesn't appear to be too dramatic as of right now. When it comes to Mullin, it seems as though President Trump really likes him. He's somebody who's on certain relevant committees that would make him appealing to be a potential DHS secretary, whether it be the Intelligence Committee when he was in the House, now in the Senate serving on the Armed Services Committee. And when it comes to Senator Mullin, too, as somebody pointed out to me earlier, confirmability is a very important thing. When you put a senator in this position, he already has a number of relationships within his own conference. So getting to 50 votes is not going to be a challenge for Senator Mullin, as it would have been maybe for somebody else, whether it be Tom Homan or some of these other potential replacements that could have been out there. So, you know, Mullin has a great relationship with just about every senator on the Republican side from what I understand. So getting to 50 votes is not going to be a challenge. And of course, if he resigns his position, that position can be appointed by the governor of Oklahoma. So there's not going to be any concerns about that seat not being filled by a Republican for any period of time, because it can happen almost immediately. Now, what's going to be interesting to watch, though, is the fact that the governor of Oklahoma is not somebody that President Trump likes. It's Governor Kevin Stitt, who has had a number of mean statements made about him by President Trump in the past. So that's going to be something to watch, who he could potentially pick if Markwayne Mullin, in fact, does have a smooth transition process to being confirmed.
And Ryan, we're also following some additional breaking news on Capitol Hill. The Senate voting right now to advance DHS funding. This comes obviously as there's a major shakeup within the department itself. You know, can you share with us your perspective on whether this breaking news about replacing Secretary Noem might have anything to do with and might influence potentially the outcome of this vote, as there continues to be a partial government shutdown over DHS funding?
Right. Well, what's interesting here is that this is one of the Democrats' demands. One of the demands Democrats had, at least on the House side, for funding DHS is that they wanted Secretary Noem to either resign or be fired. It looks like there is now a path to her leaving her position. Is that going to be enough for Democrats, or at least some of them, to vote yes? Obviously, there are some other lingering things out there like DHS reforms when it comes to ICE, and it appears that Democrats have not been satisfied with some of what Republicans have pitched so far. But, you know, the big hurdle is now looking like it's cleared, which is the fact that Democrats wanted Secretary Noem out of her position. She's now got a path to being out from her position, and that's been made public by President Trump. But obviously, this is within an hour of each other. So whether or not that's going to happen right at this moment, it's hard to see. But this does appear to make it easier to potentially have a path forward on DHS funding if, in fact, Kristi Noem is not going to be the DHS secretary in the near future.
And Ryan, for our viewers, I did want to just put up a photo of Senator Mullin so that they are aware of who this particular gentleman is. Markwayne Mullin, now going to be the new Secretary of Homeland Security. He is a senator from Oklahoma. He's going to start this job March 31st. Ryan, can you share a little bit more in terms of the timing of all of this? I mean, that's just a few weeks away. Does that indicate, if anything, significant to you?
Well, there has to be at least some type of transition time here if they want to do this the seamless way. Number one, you have a time frame for Secretary Noem to leave her position. But also keep in mind, too, if President Trump was going to fire Noem and then pick somebody else immediately, that would be hard to do. You pretty much would have to have a deputy or somebody underneath Secretary Noem or somebody kind of having that interim role. So whoever the Deputy Homeland Security Secretary is would have to pretty much take over, because there's going to be a long confirmation process that still has to go on here. Mullin has to go and meet with senators. He has to appear before a confirmation hearing in front of the Homeland Security Committee as well as other relevant committees. So he can't just take the job immediately. He's got to go through a pretty elongated process where, like I said before, he has to do hearings. He has to do meetings with senators. He has to get voted out of committee. There has to be a debate on the Senate floor, and then there has to be a vote on the Senate floor to officially confirm him. So this is not something that just can happen overnight, that Markwayne Mullin can become the Homeland Security Secretary. There does have to be a transition time there and a confirmation process that goes on that can't just happen immediately.
So, Ryan, I want to ask you this, because you were talking about there needs to be a transitional period. This is not an abrupt change. It's not an overnight change. So is Secretary Noem almost like a lame duck secretary at this point?
Well, she still has a lot of work to do in between then. You know, this isn't a job where she can just, chill out and treat it like it's a lame duck session. I mean, we have a military conflict going on with Iran. There is a massive concern about potential terror attacks happening on the United States home front. And there's also a major concern about, what you just saw in Austin, Texas, where they're investigating a mass shooting as a possible act of terror. So there are still a number of concerns and a number of issues that she's going to have to address between now and then. And the position that she's being transferred to is in many ways still going to have something to do with the Homeland Security position, where it is dealing with United States security on the home front. It's obviously not going to be the DHS secretary, not the major job where you're running this massive agency with significant security agencies underneath it, and there's a significantly high budget that's involved too. But, this is not a job you could be asleep at the wheel with, especially with all the conflicts going on throughout the world right now.
Ryan, I want to hold on a sec. It does look like we might be getting reaction from lawmakers. I'm going to raise this and listen in together. All right, so this is a live look here from outside Capitol Hill. We were just getting the very last snippet reaction, it seems like, from lawmakers as they too are hearing this breaking news as President Trump names Oklahoma Senator Mullin the new DHS secretary. The stakeout camera right here, Ryan, as we are continuing to gather, and it looks like perhaps that they're just waiting for additional lawmakers to be leaving Capitol Hill so they can question them. We're going to hang on this live look and, of course, bring you any of those updates. We see Fox News correspondent Bill Mullin right there as they're just waiting to get reaction. But as we are, I want to get your take, and I'm going to ask my producer to go back to another tweet that we were sharing as we hang on this live look right here. Ryan, there have been times when DHS Secretary Noem has come under fire for perhaps talking out of turn, particularly when she was in Minnesota. And there was some blowback there when she was talking about, the various conflicts and, of course, the fatal shootings. Bill Mullin, I'm going to stay on this shot, but I did want to read a social media post that he did post a short time ago. And it says this, quote, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem now treading in some dangerous waters. She testified in the Senate this week that President Trump approved of and was aware of a $200 million ad campaign that featured her prominently. Trump now tells Reuters in a phone call that he didn't sign off on it, saying, quote, I never knew anything about it. As President Trump saying that he didn't sign off and wasn't even aware of this $200 million ad campaign, we were hearing lawmakers on Capitol Hill asking her about it yesterday, also asking her about purchasing some planes, etc., and her spending habits. You know, was the writing on the wall, so to speak?
Well, it appeared the White House had some conflicting information and a conflicting side of the story with that, where President Trump told Reuters, as you just mentioned, that she did not have it, or President Trump was not aware of the $200 or so million that was spent, or $100+ million that was spent on this ad campaign. But she was grilled pretty intensively.
Ryan, Kristi Noem is now speaking.
Citizens that way, and the men and women who serve at the Department of Homeland Security, they understand the importance of that, and we also understand the importance of all of our law enforcement officers and what they do across the country to keep people safe. The department was formed after the horrific events on 9/11, and just 2 years later, as Congress put the department together with the support of the president, 23 different agencies who had a nexus, and a family has FLETC in it that trains over 130 different federal law enforcement agencies and officers from those agencies. It also includes CBP, ICE, CWMD, which is countering weapons of mass destruction. So some of you may have gone through some of those trainings to help us detect some of the threats here in our homeland, and also some of the trainings that it takes as far as responding to fires and 911 calls in different specific situations. We have intelligence agencies. We also cover FEMA. FEMA is a disaster response agency, but it also is the agency that's entrusted to run the government on our very worst day. If we had a tragedy in this country where we needed someone to step up because our leadership was not able to, that agency would be entrusted to do that and to maintain our critical infrastructure. So they ensure that they go forward and maintain our electrical grid and our critical infrastructure such as water and systems that we rely on every day to help the American people be safe and to still have their way of life. We also have CISA, which some of you may have worked with them, which is our cybersecurity agency, which goes out and not only hunts down bad actors that would attack us on our cyber systems, but also gives us mitigation measures for how we can harden our systems. All of these entities work together to serve the American people and to make sure that we're prepared for any threats that we may face, but also respond to them in a way that honors what our ideals are. The sacred duty of our government truly is that people are entrusted to secure the rights also of all the American people. You know, the Declaration of Independence states that governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed, which is the people. The people give us the right to do our jobs each and every day. And as long as this world is fractured and as long as human nature is fallen, we will need brave men and women who step up and serve and enforce our rights and our laws and our values. And that's what all of you do in this room with your colleagues. The heroism was on full display this last week when we saw the attack in Austin, Texas, and we saw that the first responders that helped protected people and more lives there were our law enforcement that responded immediately. Instead of running away, they ran to it. And though we lost 3 lives and saw many other people injured, they prevented so many other lives from being lost. We're very grateful that they are willing to do that and to serve in such a way. In fact, it reminded me of the quote that is often attributed to George Orwell that states, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalfs," which means you step up in order to protect people, and you do it in a way that other people often are never going to be required to. When tragedies like what we saw in Austin take place, it's your leadership and it's your decision making that make all the difference. You use judgment, and people entrust you with their lives. You're on the front lines of leadership, and you have the responsibility of guiding and also shaping the next generation. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for what you do. I know that I've met many of you in the room. I've had the chance to visit with you. I appreciate your wisdom and your advice as we continue to develop trainings and insight into how leadership can work together to make good decisions and to break down the silos between agencies so that we can work together more different, in better ways than we have in the past. And you know we're seeing challenges across the country from judges and courts that are working to stop some of our efforts, that are looking to take away some of the protections that you need in law to do your work. And then also we're seeing some challenges from sanctuary states in sanctuary cities. In fact, after I get done sharing a few more words, I want to hear your questions on ways that we can help you do your jobs. If you're in a situation where the laws may be a little different than it is in other states, or you may have unique challenges that perhaps we could work together on to find ways to help you bring criminals to justice and to protect your community from public safety threats. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's the greatest country in the world that has great cities and great communities. Regardless of where people live, we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to go to work every day safely and to send their kids to school safely every day. Sanctuary cities do give us a challenge because it makes it difficult at times for law enforcement to do their work. And we see that many times when a city cooperates with the federal government, cooperates with our federal officers, that it is safer. In fact, 7 of our top 10 safest countries in the nation are not sanctuary cities. They're cities where the local law enforcement partners with us. They partner with our federal agencies, with the FBI, DEA, ATF, CBP, ICE, and our operations. And we've also seen across the country where 5 of our 10 most crime-ridden cities do not cooperate with us, where those that are not cooperative with federal officers will see challenges on their streets. We've seen a lot of different situations from city to city. The one thing I would encourage you that no matter how frustrated you may be with some of that we can find a way to work together to do some good work for our people. In fact, even in Memphis, where we saw different leadership, we had different parties in the governorship and in the mayor, we still were able to arrest and bring to justice over 2,600 criminals, and in a way that significantly dropped their crime rate and significantly helped those communities continue to take those public safety threats off the streets. We got over 150 different illegal sex offenders off of the street. We saw one of those arrests included a criminal illegal alien from Venezuela that was convicted of aggravated criminal assault and abuse of a child. I'm thankful that that individual is no longer on the streets because of the cooperation of those local law enforcement. We have agreements across the country called 287G agreements. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but there is 3 different models that are available. One is a jail model that helps us with some detention. The other is a warrant service officer model that is extremely helpful for us to make sure that we can take jurisdiction or of an individual who's a criminal in the safety of an environment of a courthouse or a jail, and they can be turned over to ICE so that we have the ability to return them